obviously the Panthers coming into this draft did not have a second or a third round pick because they traded those picks for Sam Darnold. And we've seen how that's happened so far. Not so great, but never to fear. The quarterback drop is here. And look what happens. These quarterbacks, they're dropping. I mean, we were talking early in the draft, first round, about Panthers. I mean, Dave was very, very confident Panthers were going to go Malik Willis. I was saying they were probably going to go Pickett. Even though I didn't like that pick, I thought they would do it. Lo and behold, Pickett falls to the end of the first round of Pittsburgh. We go into at the end of the second day, the third round, you still got quarterbacks there. All of a sudden, it starts with Desmond Ridder to Atlanta, which we'll touch on that at the end of the show. And then, Malik Willis goes to Tennessee. And I'm like, okay. All of a sudden, we trade back in. We get Matt Corral. I kind of forgot how much I like Matt Corral as a prospect because I was thinking so much about the Malik Willis factor. This is a third-round pick. There's no guarantees here. We're not saying he's going to be the franchise quarterback, but I'll start with you, Josiah. When the Panthers made this pick, what were your initial thoughts?
I'll be honest. I thought it was a little bit of a misstep because Sam Howell was right there. And I had Sam Howell as my second highest rated quarterback in the entire draft.
Sure.
I've been really high on him, singing his praises for a while now. And I felt like we missed out on something. But the fact that a quarterback was even there for us to take at the bottom of the third is amazing. And if Matt Corral pans out, I think that's great. I see a lot of Marcus Mariota in him, the good and the bad. And I feel like you have to bend to the type of offense he runs or he ran in college with Lane Kiffin, which is a lot of RPOs. Mm-hmm. And when you take away those RPO factors and you look at his stats, it's not great. It's not great.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of good and bad there. And you pointed out that, you had Sam Howell high. I'll turn it over to Dave real quick, and then I'll give my take. Dave, your thoughts on Matt Corral going to the Panthers in the third round?
Yeah, so obviously there's like a ton to unpack here. I'll start by saying this. Like you said, I was high on Malik Willis, and that was what I was hoping for. So I just want to share the fact that watching him fall that far and us not trade up to take him was driving me absolutely nuts, especially once we got into the third round. Josiah, you said Sam Howell was your number 2. Who was your number 1? Was it Kenny Pickett?
Malik Willis.
It was Malik Willis. Okay, cool. Yeah. So we were on the same page there. I had Matt Corral as my number 2. I feel like Matt Corral, just like every other quarterback in this draft class, he was a tough one to figure out, and that's kind of why there were no surefire things in the class. But I think when you just look at, you can start with the intangibles, with the leadership skills. The dude is just a freaking dog, man. And, his team won 10 games last year, and they really weren't that good. They weren't a 10-win team in a lot of ways. And his receivers were not great. His offensive line was always not very good. Yes, he did run a lot of RPOs. But it's kind of with him and Malik Willis, I kind of saw it the same way. I don't think it's fair to knock a guy for running the offense he's put in, if that makes sense. As far as the numbers you're talking about, I haven't seen those numbers, and I'm sure they are bad. But at the same time, like I said, he wasn't surrounded with a ton of talent. But from what I saw, he wasn't always perfect. So I'm not going to sit here and act like he was. He did make mistakes sometimes, but I also think he did a good job of A, leading the team, and B, putting his team in good positions. Even when there weren't a lot of opportunities to make good things happen, I feel like he still found a way to do it. And I think that's all you can hope for, with a quarterback, especially if you're talking in the third round. But, he can spin that damn rock, man. He's got an arm. He's got the feet. He can make plays on his feet. He's got a lightning fast release. There weren't a lot of deeper intermediate routes in his game that I saw. But from what he did with the RPOs, he fit a lot of balls into tight windows. So that was good to see. And, honestly, when I watch him play, I mean, there are as far as his release, as quick as his release is and his ability to move around, make throws from, bad platforms and weird angles. I saw a lot of Aaron Rodgers-y stuff. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be Aaron Rodgers, but I saw some
Aaron Rodgers
is quite the comp.
I saw some Aaron Rodgers-y stuff. And I also think there's a little bit of Tony Romo-ish stuff in there too, as far as, keeping plays alive and things of that nature. But it's very difficult to get a read on the guy when, like you said, he runs the RPO offense. It's really just one read. And it was the same thing, like I said, with Malik Willis. It was one read and tuck the ball. I mean, that was really all they were asked to do. And when he tucked the ball, I mean, he ran hard, which is probably going to get him killed in the NFL. But you like to see that from a leader. So, was he perfect all the time? No, but there were a lot of good things that I saw as far as a guy you're taking in the third round. So, personally, I'm hopeful.
My favorite thing about this kid is that he beat up Wayne Gretzky's son in high school. And to me, that means he's an absolute dog, and I love it. But in all seriousness, I kind of had forgotten a little bit about him because I got so hyped up into the Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett debate that I thought for a fact we were going to go with one of the two, that I kind of had forgot about Matt Corral. And then I realized how much stuff I liked about his game. Like you said, the quick release, there's a lot of guys in the NFL that don't have that have that long windup. It's not so quick. I mean, that's a good attribute to have. He's quick with his feet and with his hips. He can turn and make throws. He's got a deep ball. It's not the deepest ball, the most accurate, but he can do it. With the RPOs, like you said, not necessarily a pro-style offense, but he has played in the SEC for a couple of years. He's playing against some pretty good talent. He hasn't had the most talent around him. But at the end of the day, my thing is that the Panthers got a guy that could be hit or miss in the third round, and to me, that's okay. And like Josiah said, hey, I'm a big Tar Heels guy. I wanted Sam Howell really bad. I did, and I talked about that with Dave.
Yep.
And once he started sliding, I started to get the itch. I was like, Sam Howell is going to come to Carolina. It's going to be great.
You texted me on draft night about Sam Howell.
And, it didn't end up happening, and that's okay. I think Sam Howell will probably have a better shot in Washington. Maybe we'll see. I think, Carson Wentz will end up getting hurt at some point or bench. But, there's some things I like about both of them. The only thing that I would say that I like more about Matt Corral than Sam Howell is, and this isn't necessarily a skill set thing, but he just seems to have that more of that it in that dog in that, like, I want to win factor, where Sam Howell's a little bit more relaxed, pressed off, and he just kind of lets the game come to him. And I feel like with Carolina right now, they need someone that's going to come in and be like, hey, step aside. Like, let me show you how it's done. Like, this is going to be my team. Right. And this could pan out. It could not pan out. I have no idea. I like both guys. I hope they do well. But, we'll see. My next question really is, and, we don't know this, is let's say Matt Corral has a pretty good camp and he shows some signs in the preseason. Is he competing for that starting job, or is it Sam Darnold's going to start?
Ooh.
What do you think, Josiah?
I think he's in the running if he has good camp, just because of how desperate Matt Rule has to be to keep his job. Whether
100%.
Whether Matt Corral is ready or not, which that's what I'm more worried about. I'm not worried that he'll be ready or not. I'm worried that whether he is or not, he'll be pushed into the starting position by other people who are trying to keep their jobs. But I did say some negative things about Matt Corral. I do want to say, if he was going to go to an offensive coordinator, I think Ben McAdoo, not my favorite coordinator, but I think what he's done throughout the years in the past, and his work with Aaron Rodgers back in the day and his work with Eli Manning, I think he does a really good job with quarterbacks. And Matt Corral could fit into that style of offense, that get the ball out quick type system that, McAdoo loves to run. I think Matt Corral fits well in that, area. And if you go back and watch the bowl game versus Baylor, he had some pretty nice deep balls against, future Panther at the time, now Panther, Kalen Barnes. Kalen Barnes gave up some pretty bad touchdowns.
Some good news and some bad news there.
Yeah, good news and some bad news.
Cool.
But I think Matt Corral has the potential to be good, and I think that he does have that chip on his shoulder. I think he is that leader that you guys were talking about. I'm just a little hesitant to put my faith into him yet because I see a lot of places where if he doesn't learn, if he doesn't figure it out fast and he's thrown into the starting position, he's just going to be another quarterback bust that we look at in the next couple of years and go, why do we draft that guy? How did he get to this position? Why did we trade up for him?
Right. Yeah, and you both just brought up good points that I, wanted to talk about. Tanner, you were talking about, how he's got that dog and he's got that fight in him. He's such a good leader. How many times over the past 2 years have we watched Sam Darnold or Teddy Bridgewater just roll over and die when things got tough?
Every
the Panthers
time.
need
Every
that kind
time.
of
Every
the
time.
Panthers need that kind of leader back there. So I'm really excited to, if nothing else, see somebody who's a competitor back there again, because we've just been rolling out these guys who are just intramural league quarterbacks. It feels like just out there for the hell of it, not caring whether they win or not. And then also, Josiah, you brought up Ben McAdoo. That's a great point. Ben McAdoo has a real good history with quarterbacks. Usually he's got a good eye. I don't remember what year it was. I want to say it was like 2018. Somebody had asked him about the quarterbacks, and I don't remember everything he said, but he nailed it as far as the guys coming out. And I believe Sam Darnold, I think it was that year, because I think Sam Darnold was one of the guys he mentioned, and he talked about the things like decision making that we're seeing as really big issues in the NFL. And then also Chris Sims. I don't know if you guys how familiar you are with Chris Sims, but he's one of the few analysts whose opinions I trust, especially when it comes to quarterbacks. And he had Matt Corral ranked as his number one quarterback. So that's two guys whose opinions on quarterbacks I'm willing to listen to, and I feel like I agree with a lot of things that they say in their evaluations of what they saw. I just lost my train of thought. I had one more thing too, but yeah, I'm excited, man. We're always when you're talking about young quarterbacks and you're talking about that's what it was. Coaches trying to keep their jobs. They're trying to sell hope. So there is a good chance that Matt Corral could end up in there. Trying to give David Tepper a reason to keep Matt Rule around. Matt Rule could be looking to create opportunities for the young quarterback so he can say, yeah, man, I need to develop him for a couple more years and you're going to have a star on your hands. So.
Yeah, and then lastly, I just kind of want to touch on what Josiah said. I do worry a little bit about, and then we talked about this pre-draft as well, it's about the Panthers pushing certain things because it's like you got two different types of teams. You've got a team that's young that needs to develop, and then a coach and a staff that needs to win now, and they don't necessarily have the pieces to do that yet. So it's a balance between, is Matt Corral ready to play day one if he can, if it's an option, or is it something Sam Darnold kind of stinks it up 4 or 5 games during the year, and then you put Matt Corral in and like, oh, look, he played well. Like, give me another year. So it is a tough thing to measure. Excuse me. So we'll see there with how it goes. And he's wearing number 9. I like that number. Best quarterback in the NFC South to wear number 9, Drew Brees. He was pretty good. So let's see if he can do the same thing.
Oh, Drew Brees is definitely in second now that Matt Corral is wearing number. He's already the best.
He is. Matt Corral had to call Rodney Peete to get his permission to wear that number.
Oh, that's big facts, obviously.
Rodney Peete, are you serious?
Stephon Gilmore did too last year. You don't take a legend's number without permission.
Well, a lot of people online were like, you better not wear number 4. That's John Casey's number. I'm like, what?
Dude, Panthers fans will forever be attached to John Casey. I don't know, man.
So,
Dude, Jermaine Carter wore number 4 last year. What are you talking about?
no one said a thing until this year. I don't know. It's weird. So moving down the rest of this list, I'll be honest, I'm going to